I'm going to be reading to you from Paul's letter to the church in Philippi, and I'm reading from chapter 1 and verse 12. Now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. And because of my chains, most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. The Apostle Paul wrote his wonderful letter to the church in Philippi whilst in chains. Yet he says he was in chains for Christ. Do you suddenly feel a bit like you're in chains? I bet most of you do. Question is, though we might feel rather imprisoned, can we too be in chains for Christ? And if so, can we still become more confident in the Lord and even dare all the more to proclaim the gospel? Well, if so, how? I'll come to that in a minute. But first, I just want to share with you a true story in the hope that it'll encourage you and bring some helpful perspective to our current situation and being in chains for Christ. It's a story some of you may have heard me share before. It's the story of Hey Wu. She shared her story one evening with us at Spring Harvest a couple of years ago. Hey Wu is from North Korea, a country that suffers from severe famine amidst the oppression of a communist dictator. In some places, all people can find to eat are bare blades of grass and the bark of the trees. Hey Wu's own daughter died of malnutrition. To be a Christian in North Korea is to risk imprisonment, torture, and death, just like Paul and the early Christians faced 2,000 years ago. One day, the authorities came for Hey Wu's husband. She had no idea why. He was chained and tortured in a North Korean prison for years. And then one day, their young children were allowed to see him. On returning home, Hey Wu's children showed her what their dad had written on their palms. Pray to Jesus. He is the one who will answer your prayers, is what he'd written. He was in chains for Christ, yet he dared all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Hey Wu was stunned. She had no idea he was a Christian. He had kept it secret for their sakes. They continued to torture her husband until he'd renounced his faith. And he died in that prison. But he refused to deny Jesus, even on the night that he died. Hey Wu eventually escaped to China, and there she found an underground church. She became a Christian, but like her husband, the authorities eventually caught up with her and sent her back to North Korea, where she too was imprisoned in a labor camp. Yet, she started a secret church inside the camp, and 5 other women became Christians through her witness. She was in chains for Christ, yet she dared all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. After 2 years, believing Hey Wu had successfully been re-educated, she was released, and she and her children managed to escape to South Korea. And she has continued to proclaim the gospel around the world ever since. As it was with Paul, what happened to her actually served to advance the gospel. You know, the history shows that the quickest way to advance the gospel is actually to ban it and make it illegal. And that is still the case today. Christianity is growing at its fastest rates in China and Korea. Now, maybe this could be such a time. We are all being restricted, though for very good reasons. But it might feel like we are in chains. And as our church buildings are being ordered to close, it may feel like the practice of our faith is being banned. Yet these things might actually serve to advance the gospel. They can, if we become confident and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Well, how? You might ask. Here are 6 ways, and this is by no means an exhaustive list. 1. Pick up the phone. You don't have to be a fan of Who Wants to Be a Millionaire to phone a friend. Obviously, we need to be phoning and supporting one another during these difficult days. But also, phone your friends and family who you know are not Christian. You could be the voice of hope in the darkness. You might be the only Bible that they're going to read at a time when they need to hear the gospel. 2. Make sure your faith is not hidden. Do all your neighbours know that you're a Christian house? That yours is a house of the Lord? Boldly displayed. Put a cross in the window. Do you have something like that you could put in your window? Maybe attach Bible verses on the front door or the window. Do you have, or could you order something like this, for example? This lights up of an evening at night, and we can put it on our windowsill with whatever Bible verse we choose. Or do you have maybe anything like these? I saw somebody in our church was given one of these in the last couple of days. Or a holding cross, or something like these. I've got lots of these. Perhaps you could leave one on your doorstep for the delivery driver, or pop one in that bag of groceries that you're taking round to a neighbour in isolation. Or maybe a tract. I've just ordered 100 tracts. Hope Beyond Coronavirus, they're called. And I'm thinking about how I can use them. I wanted to show you one, but they haven't yet arrived in the post. But I'll post a link as to how you can get them just below. 3. Share online. That Bible verse, that testimony, that prayer. If it meant something to you, pass it on. For example, there was an item last week that we put on our church page, our church Facebook page. It's a short story where 2 babies in a womb discussed if there was life after delivery. 12 visitors shared it from our Facebook page. Now, the average Facebook user, believe it or not, has 338 friends. That means that potentially thousands of people on Facebook might now see that post. So think, do I have any friends that I'd want to see this? If so, hit that share button. 4, use this time to grow. Be intentional and organized about not just maintaining and drawing on your faith, but actually growing it. Get that Christian book off the shelf. Do that Bible study or online course. We're sharing several of them on our church Facebook page. The daily Bible in 1 year, or the weekly Bible project teaching, or the midweek share prayer course. We're sharing all these resources and more online or through email. Let's do some of these things together. Above all, try to develop a new pattern of Christian living, a new routine, the daily devotional, the morning and evening prayers, listening to sermons online, putting on that worship music, whatever works for you. 5, if you're in a home or Bible study group or prayer group, stay in close contact to each other. Be rocks for one another. Being there for one another is one of the best things about being family. Support, lift, and grow one another, just as iron sharpens iron. And 6, be that witness beyond the church. Earlier this week, the Prime Minister asked for volunteers to help the NHS in this country. And there's been a wonderful response so far. Now, for many of us, that might not really be an option, because either we're vulnerable or there's someone in our household that is. But if you are in a position to offer yourself, get in there. Be that Christian witness, supporting those that work on the front line. And if, for very good reasons, you can't be that practical support, then of course, be that spiritual support. Pray. And pray especially for those who are on the front lines, in the NHS and other key workers. And if you get the opportunity, let them know that you are praying for them. And if you yourself are on that front line, and I know that there are several in our church who are, do pray for your colleagues. And again, where appropriate, let them know that you're praying for them. In times such as these, so many will actually be more grateful than you'd imagine that they've got you alongside them, lifting them up in prayer. Like Paul and Hey Woo, you can be a powerful witness in these times of trial. So the question for all of us is this: can your friends, your relatives, your work colleagues, can they look at you and know that it is your faith and you drawing close to Christ that's holding you firm, giving you hope, and getting you through? So pray, brothers and sisters. Keep praying for each other and our nation. And pray for those opportunities to proclaim the gospel of salvation, which is the most precious gift we have. And it is all the more precious in times such as these. Draw people to Christ, for he is the author of our salvation. He alone offers salvation. Draw people's attention to him. Draw people's attention to the cross. because it is there that he shared in our suffering and distress. And draw people's attention to that empty tomb, especially this Easter, because his resurrection is where hope springs eternal. During and perhaps because of these tough times, tough and distressing times ahead, what would you give to see a friend, a loved one, or even a work colleague come to know the love of God and his salvation through Jesus Christ? Friends, we can do this. May God bless us and draw near to us all. For the light shines in the darkness. Amen.